Hello friends, today we will discuss about neuronal regulation or neuronal mechanism which is responsible for maintenance of normal blood pressure in the human body. In the previous video, we had discussed about humoral mechanism concept where there is a malfunction in humoral mechanism leads to persistent elevation in blood pressure. It has three components: renin, angiotensin, aldosterone system, natriuretic peptide or hormones, and insulin resistance or hyperinsulinemia. In this video, we will discuss the second most important part of hypertension pathophysiology, that is neuronal mechanism. Now, when there is a abnormal neuronal mechanism, that will lead to disturbance in the homeostasis of neuronal regulation of blood pressure, and it lead to persistently elevation in blood pressure. So let us understand neuronal mechanism in detail. This neuronal mechanism is comprised of mainly two important parts. One is baroreceptor and central nervous system mediated blood pressure regulation, and second is adrenergic receptor or adrenergic nerve fiber mediated homeostatic blood pressure regulation. Now in this video we will be discussing about how baroreceptor combine with the central nervous system regulates the blood pressure, and when there is an abnormality in one of the component of baroreceptor and central nervous system, there will be disturbance in the homeostasis mechanism which lead to high blood pressure. In order to understand the baroreceptor mediated mechanism of blood pressure regulation, we need to understand how baroreceptor signaling and controlling from central nervous system works. So first of all, we need to understand this is a structure of heart. Here, this is a left atria and left ventricle. This left ventricle is responsible for pushing the blood through aorta to the whole body. Now, in this aortic juncture, there is a blood pressure sensitizing cells which we know as baroreceptors. We had discussed baroreceptor in renin, angiotensin, aldosterone system video where we have understood that baroreceptors are present in the juxtaglomerulus apparatus. Here we are discussing about the baroreceptors which is present in the aorta and carotid sinus. There are two different components where blood pressure sensitizing cells are present, which is precisely known as baroreceptors. They are present in carotid sinus and aorta. Now, whenever there is a fluctuation in blood pressure, there will be sensitization of blood pressure fluctuation by this baroreceptor present in the aortic region and carotid sinus region. Now, if let us assume that blood pressure is increasing, cardiac output is increasing, that is creating more pressure on the aortic region as well as in the carotid sinus region, and that is sensitized by the baroreceptor. Now this baroreceptor, how it will communicate to central nervous system to maintain the blood pressure. So first of all, when the carotid sinus sensitize the rise in blood pressure, it will give a signal through this baroreceptor to the central nervous system via 9th cranial nerve. We have 12 cranial nerve in the human body. Here the 9th number cranial nerve, which is known as glossopharyngeal cranial nerve, is signaling the change in blood pressure from carotid sinus to the brain region. Now there is also baroreceptor which is present in the aortic region. This aortic region baroreceptor, when sensitized the change in blood pressure, it will send the signal to the brain via 10th cranial nerve, which is known as vagus nerve. So this is a glossopharyngeal nerve and this is a vagus nerve which is sensitizing the change in blood pressure from the baroreceptor and communicating signal from the baroreceptor or from the carotid sinus and aorta to the central nervous system. These cranial nerves are mixed type of cranial nerves. Cranial nerves which is having a sensory as well as motor, both the function, they are known as mixed type of cranial nerve. So these are sensitizing the signal and giving the signal to the central nervous system. Now let us understand how central nervous system react to the signal which is achieved from the peripheral region. Now this central nervous system has a specialized mechanism. First of all, this central nervous system, in the medulla oblongata and the lower pons region, there are certain nuclei which is responsible for regulation of blood pressure. The first one is known as nucleus of tractus solitarius. Now this nucleus of tractus solitarius, which is also known as solitarius nucleus, is responsible for sensitizing change in blood pressure and receiving the signal from the 9th as well as 10th cranial nerve. Once it will receive the signal from the cranial nerve, it will stimulate the receptor which is present in the peripheral region. The first receptor is area postrema, second is vagal nuclei, and third is vasomotor center. These three specific juncture present nearby the nucleus of tractus solitarius is stimulated when there is a signal coming from the peripheral neuronal mechanism. Now, let us understand how this nucleus of tractus solitarius will stimulate the different center in different situations. So, once there is a rise in blood pressure, there is a signal reached to the nucleus of tractus solitarius. First of all, this nucleus of tractus solitarius will stimulate vagal flow through vagal nuclei. This vagal nuclei will come into the picture and it will stimulate the vagal outflow. Now we all know that vagal outflow is inhibitory in nature. Now let us understand how this vagal outflow works. So this vagal outflow will stimulate cardio-inhibitory center which is present in the brain itself. Now this cardio-inhibitory center is giving a signal through again cranial nerve to the heart as well as to the different part of body. Now this cardio-inhibitory center is having neuronal regulation. So through right vagus it gives signal to the SN node and through left vagus it gives signals to the AV node. How it will give signal and what will be the action on the SN node and AV node, that we will discuss using receptor based mechanism. So once the vagal outflow is stimulated, once the cardio-inhibitory center is stimulated, it will release acetylcholine to the SN node and AV node through right and vagus nerve respectively. Now this acetylcholine is a parasympathetic component of parasympathetic system, and when it releases, it binds to the parasympathetic receptor. This parasympathetic receptor is located in the heart. M2 receptor is precisely located in the heart, which is G protein coupled receptor and works via G inhibitory mechanism. Whenever there is a stimulation of M2 receptor present in the SN node, there will be activation of G inhibitory protein, which will decrease the stimulation of adenyl cyclase and decrease the cyclic AMP level. This cyclic AMP is responsible for activation of protein kinase A, and protein kinase A is responsible for contraction. This whole mechanism is inhibited by acetylcholine, and thus it will decrease sinus rhythm, or we can say it will decrease the cardiac impulse generation by the SN node. So there will be decrease in heart rate, there will be decrease in cardiac output, there will be decrease in blood pressure. This is how there will be a regulation of blood pressure via cardio-inhibitory center, which is stimulated by the vagal outflow. Now the second mechanism which will activated when the nucleus of tractus solitarius gets a signal from the peripheral neuronal system about the high blood pressure is inhibition of sympathetic outflow and cardio accelerator area. This cardio accelerator area is also located near to the nucleus of tractus solitarius, which is responsible for stimulation of sympathetic outflow. So whenever there is a stimulation of nucleus, whenever signal is received from the peripheral system to nucleus of tractus solitarius about high blood pressure, it will inhibit sympathetic outflow, and thus it will inhibit cardio accelerator center. Now, how inhibiting cardio accelerator center will help us to decrease the blood pressure? Let us understand using this concept. This postganglionic fiber coming from the cardio accelerator area is responsible for secretion of norepinephrine from the ganglia. This secretion from the postganglionic fiber, preganglionic fiber will secrete ACH, and if it is a sympathetic system, it will release norepinephrine through postganglionic fiber. So this postganglionic fiber releases norepinephrine, and this norepinephrine has a receptor, adrenergic receptor in the heart. So this norepinephrine will go and bind to the beta 1 receptor present in the SN node, and this beta 1 receptor is G protein coupled stimulatory receptor. It will increase cyclic AMP level, it will stimulate protein kinase A, and it will increase the heart rate. But because of inhibition of sympathetic outflow, inhibition of cardioacceleratory area, there will be decreasing the level of norepinephrine and decrease the norepinephrine mediated actions. So that is a second mechanism which is helping to bring down the blood pressure in the aortic region as well as carotid sinus region. The last and third mechanism, whenever there is a signaling from the peripheral system to the nucleus of tractus solitarius about high blood pressure, it will stimulate vasomotor center. Now this vasomotor center will be inhibited. Whenever there is a fall in blood pressure, vasomotor center is stimulated. Whenever there is a rise in blood pressure, vasomotor center is inhibited. Here there is a inhibition of vasomotor center, and this inhibition of vasomotor center decreases the sympathetic outflow. Whenever there is a decrease in sympathetic outflow, how this will help us? Decrease in sympathetic outflow will not stimulate renin, angiotensin, aldosterone system via kidney, because we all know that norepinephrine, when bind to the beta 1 receptor present in the kidney, there will be release of renin and the renin angiotensin system will be activated. But here we are inhibiting sympathetic outflow via vasomotor center. So we are inhibiting the renin release. So we are inhibiting the activation, or we are deactivating the renin angiotensin aldosterone system. Second, when the sympathetic outflow decreases, the direct action of norepinephrine on the blood vessel will also inhibited, and that will lead to arteriolodilation as well as venodilation. These two dilation leads to decrease in systolic as well as diastolic blood pressure. And lastly, decreasing the norepinephrine level will also decrease the synthesis of catecholamines from the adrenal medulla, and which will also further decrease the level of epinephrine in the blood. So this neuronal component which is taking signal from the heart about the fluctuation in blood pressure and controlling the blood pressure via brain mechanism, combinedly known as baroreceptor plus central nervous system mediated neuronal regulation. This is normal in our human body. Whenever there is a rise in blood pressure, the compensatory mechanism will try to decrease the blood pressure. Whenever there is a fall in blood pressure, this compensatory mechanism try to stimulate the blood pressure. Let me again explain. Whenever there is a rise in blood pressure, there will be stimulation of cardioinhibitory center and deactivation or inhibition of cardioaccelerator and vasomotor center. If there is a fall in blood pressure, there will be inhibition of cardioinhibitory center and stimulation of cardioaccelerator center and vasomotor center, vice versa. So this is how neuronal regulation works. Now let us coming to the pathophysiology of hypertension. Whenever there is a hypertension, this is become abnormal. This is very important. This neuronal mechanism or regulation becomes abnormal, meaning one of the component which is regulating this homeostasis mechanism is disturbed, or we can say altered. Due to one component alteration, it leads to further alteration in the subsequent components, and that chain will try to disbalance the neuronal mechanism or regulation in the human body, and that leads to persistent elevation in the blood pressure. So this is all about baroreceptor and central nervous system regulated neuronal mechanism. In the next video, we will be discussing about adrenergic receptors. There are certain adrenergic receptors present in the human body which is responsible for stimulation of sympathetic outflow, and then there is a receptor which is having an intrinsic activity or action on the different parts of a human body, which will also help in regulating blood pressure.